My wife planned a cheating lover's weekend. I recorded everything, pepper sprayed her lingerie, filed for divorce, and took my life fully back home. That Wednesday evening, everything seemed normal at first. Linda was standing there waiting for me with a soft smile, which honestly wasn't unusual after 10 years of marriage. But as I put down my bag and started loosening my tie, she asked me to sit down at the kitchen table. Her tone wasn't harsh, but there was something unsettling in it. "We need to talk," she said, and right there I felt the ground shift under me. In every book or article I'd ever read, those words signaled something bad. I sat down, trying to stay calm. She hesitated, which only made it worse. Finally, she said, "I want you to know that I love you. I've always loved you, and I want to grow old with you." I nodded, waiting for the catch, and there it was. She took a deep breath and said, "But I've decided I want to take a lover." I froze for a moment. I thought I'd misheard her. My mind was scrambling to process what she just said. "A lover," I repeated, incredulous. "You mean you love me? You want to stay married to me, but you want to sleep with someone else?" She gave me this calm, almost rehearsed smile and said, "Yes, but it's not just about sex. I feel like this is something I need. It's an experience I want to have, and I believe our love is strong enough to handle it." Strong enough to handle it? I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. I asked her if she had already made plans, and she admitted she was thinking about going away with him the next weekend. I didn't even know how to respond to that. A part of me wanted to yell, to demand answers, but another part just couldn't believe this was real. So I asked her one thing. The only thing that made sense to me in that moment. If I came to you with this same proposal, how would you react? She hesitated, her expression twisting slightly, and then she said, "I think I could handle it, as long as you promised it wouldn't change how you felt about me." That was a lie. I knew it, and deep down so did she. I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. "You'd go through the roof if I even suggested something like this," I said, my voice shaking with anger. She seemed surprised by my reaction, almost like she hadn't anticipated any pushback. "I really thought you'd love me enough to let me do something that means so much to me," she said, sounding frustrated, as if I were the unreasonable one. At that moment, something inside me broke. This wasn't the woman I'd spent a decade with. I realized she had already crossed a line just by wanting this, and now she was standing there expecting me to go along with it. "Give me a few days to think about it," I finally said. Not because I needed to think, but because I needed to plan my next steps. I walked away, heading to the guest room because I couldn't even bring myself to sleep in the same bed as her that night. As I moved my things, she asked what I was doing. "I don't want to share a bed with someone who's thinking about someone else while lying next to me," I told her. When I shut the door to the guest room that night, I didn't sleep much. I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my head, every word cutting deeper. But by the time the sun rose, one thing was crystal clear. If she went through with this, our marriage was over. I woke up the next morning feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My mind was running in 100 different directions. As I sat on the edge of the bed, I realized I couldn't just sit back and let this unfold without knowing every detail. Linda had blindsided me, but I wasn't going to let her keep me in the dark anymore. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I grabbed my car keys and left the house, not even bothering to speak to her. I called into work and told them I needed the next 2 days off for personal reasons. Thankfully, my boss didn't press for details. That gave me time to figure out exactly what was going on and what I was going to do about it. My first stop was a store where I picked up 3 voice-activated recorders. They weren't anything fancy, but they would do the job. One went near the home phone, another in the bedroom, and the third in her car. After that, I went to the cell phone provider. Since her phone account was under my name, it was surprisingly easy to get access to her call logs. I noted a number that had appeared frequently in the past few weeks. It didn't take a genius to figure out who it probably belonged to. When I got home, she was still at work, so I started digging through her things. I wasn't proud of it, but at this point, pride didn't matter. I found an email account I didn't even know she had, but the password was simple enough to guess. Once I was in, it was like opening Pandora's box. There were dozens of emails between her and someone named Frank Jones. The messages confirmed everything. They weren't just talking about getting together. They had plans for the following weekend. They had booked a hotel room in Kansas City, and Linda was gushing about how excited she was to finally be with him. My stomach turned as I read their exchanges. It wasn't just sex. They were talking about dinners, dancing, and even shopping for lingerie. She had even described some new underwear she'd bought just for him. By the time I finished reading, I felt physically sick, but I also felt something else: determination. If she thought she could do this without consequences, she was dead wrong. I forwarded all the emails to myself, ensuring I'd have proof when the time came. Then I set up her account to forward any new messages directly to me without leaving any trace. The final step that day was installing 2 GPS trackers. One went into her wallet. She always kept it with her, so I knew it would be a reliable option. The other went in her car, discreetly tucked away. I tested both to make sure they were working and could track her in real time. By the time she got home, I had everything in place. That evening, I barely looked at her. She asked if I was feeling okay, and I just shrugged. How could I even begin to answer that? Later, when she went to take a shower, I seized the opportunity to check her phone. It was unlocked, another mistake on her part. Her text messages with Frank were just as explicit as the emails. She'd sent him photos of the lingerie, describing how she couldn't wait to see his reaction. I felt a fresh wave of disgust, but also a grim sense of validation. Now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. After planting the GPS devices and checking all the surveillance, I finally sat down to think. I wasn't just reacting emotionally anymore, I was strategizing. If Linda thought she could play me for a fool, she had no idea who she was dealing with. This wasn't about saving the marriage anymore. This was about preparing for the end of it. By the next morning, my plan was taking shape. I wasn't just going to let this happen and walk away empty-handed. No, if Linda wanted to play games, I was going to make sure she understood exactly what was at stake. I had spent years building our life together, and if she was willing to tear it down, I was going to make damn sure she felt every brick crumble. The first step was visiting a lawyer. I had never thought I'd need one, let alone for something like this, but that's where I found myself on Friday morning. I walked into a highly recommended firm and sat down with a man who seemed sharp and ready to go to war. I laid everything out for him, every email, text message, and call record I'd gathered in the last 48 hours. I explained what Linda had planned and that Frank Jones was the man in question. He leaned back in his chair, clearly impressed with the evidence I'd already collected. "This will make things straightforward," he said. "We can file for divorce under adultery, but we'll need concrete proof of the affair happening. You're off to a great start, though." That was all the encouragement I needed. Before I left, I asked about filing a lawsuit against Frank for alienation of affection. The lawyer confirmed it was an option, provided I had sufficient proof. I left his office feeling like I had some control again. Linda might have thought she was being clever, but she hadn't counted on me fighting back. Back at home, I started tying up the loose ends of our shared life. I went to the bank and closed all of our joint accounts, transferring the funds into a new account in my name. I canceled every credit card that had both our names on it and left her with just enough to get by. This wasn't about being cruel. It was about protecting myself. If she wanted to blow up our life, I wasn't going to let her take me down with her. That afternoon, I bought a small can of pepper spray. It might seem petty, but after reading those messages about her sexy new lingerie, I knew exactly where that spray was going. I wore gloves, took her underwear out of her suitcase, and sprayed the crotch of her panties and the cups of her bras. Then I packed everything back neatly. Let's just say I wanted her weekend to be memorable, but not in the way she'd planned. I also reserved the hotel room they had booked for Thursday night, right before their romantic weekend was set to start. My plan was simple. I'd install cameras in the room ahead of time to capture everything. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about ensuring I had ironclad proof for the divorce and the lawsuit against Frank. That evening, I avoided Linda like the plague. When she tried to make small talk over dinner, I gave her one-word answers and pretended to be engrossed in my plate. She looked frustrated but didn't press. I went to bed early, not because I was tired, but because I couldn't stomach sitting across from her knowing what she had planned for the weekend. Over the next couple of days, I kept checking the GPS trackers and the forwarded emails. They were still discussing their plans, oblivious to the fact that I was watching every move. Frank even told her he'd booked a fancy dinner for Saturday night, followed by a night of dancing. Linda replied with enthusiasm, mentioning how excited she was to make this unforgettable for both of them. Unforgettable indeed. I thought about everything I had put in place, the recordings, the cameras, the financial cutoffs. By Sunday night, I knew there was no turning back. She had made her choice, and now I was ready to make mine. Thursday arrived, and with it came a sense of finality. Linda had spent the morning humming around the house, completely oblivious to the storm brewing around her. I left early, claiming I had work to catch up on, but in reality I was headed straight for the hotel, where she and Frank had made their plans. I checked into their room 125, just as I'd seen in their emails. It felt strange standing in the space where they'd soon try to destroy what was left of our marriage, but I wasn't here to brood. I was here to set the stage. I carefully installed 2 fiber optic cameras, ensuring every angle of the bed was covered. I tested them, adjusted the placement, and tested them again. By the time I finished, it was perfect. There would be no denying what went on in this room. Before leaving, I made one final sweep of the room, ensuring it looked untouched. Then I walked out, locking the door behind me as if I'd never been there. The rest of the day, I kept a low profile. Linda would soon be on her way to meet Frank. My phone buzzed with updates from the GPS trackers I'd planted. She was on the move. Friday came, and so did the moment of truth. I watched on my laptop as Linda and Frank checked into the hotel, her suitcase in his hand as they giggled like 2 teenagers sneaking off to prom night. My stomach churned, but I kept watching. They entered the room, and within minutes, the cameras I'd planted came to life. There they were, laughing and embracing like nothing else mattered. Frank wasn't much to look at. He was shorter than I'd imagined, and when the clothes came off, well, let's just say Linda had downgraded. I'll admit there was a grim satisfaction in seeing her face falter as the reality of her choice sank in. Still, they carried on. Watching it was like swallowing glass, but I forced myself to endure it. I needed this for the lawyer. By Saturday, it was clear things weren't going as smoothly as they'd hoped. Linda looked frustrated on camera. Frank's performance wasn't exactly inspiring, and the novelty of their affair was already wearing thin. I saw her checking her phone frequently, her expression shifting between anger and worry. She tried calling me once, but I'd ignored it. She could stew in her own mess for all I cared. That evening, I played my next card. I ordered Linda's favorite pizza and had it delivered to their room just as things were heating up again. Watching Frank answer the door in a bathrobe while Linda scrambled to cover herself was almost worth all the trouble. I laughed out loud when the delivery guy refused to leave until Frank paid. Linda looked mortified, and Frank looked furious. When they finally settled down, I doubled down on my efforts. I ordered a sandwich, another of Linda's favorites, and had it sent over. By the time the knock came, Linda was in the middle of trying to salvage their night. She answered the door herself this time, her face red with embarrassment. I could see her piecing it together as she stared at the sandwich, realizing I knew exactly where they were. Later that night, she sat on the edge of the bed staring at her phone. Frank tried to comfort her, but she pushed him away, clearly done with his attempts. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, and I sat back satisfied that their perfect weekend had turned into a nightmare. But the best was yet to come. Sunday morning they packed up to leave, but not before Linda had an extended shower. When she emerged, her skin was red and irritated, thanks to the pepper spray I'd applied to her lingerie. She looked miserable as she got dressed, and Frank wasn't offering much sympathy. Their weekend of romance had ended with frustration, irritation, and a complete lack of satisfaction. As they drove back, I positioned myself near our house, parked where Linda could see me. When they pulled into the driveway, she stepped out, gave Frank a weak hug, and grabbed her suitcase. As they drove past me, she glanced my way and gave me a smug look. I responded with a middle finger, watching her expression fall as I held it there. Linda walked into the house, dragging her suitcase behind her. The sound of the wheels on the hardwood floor cut through the football game I was pretending to watch. She stood there for a moment, probably expecting some sort of acknowledgement or greeting. When she didn't get one, she cleared her throat and said, "I'm home." I didn't even look at her. "Good for you," I muttered, keeping my eyes glued to the TV. I wasn't about to make this easy for her. She walked over and stood between me and the screen, trying to force some kind of interaction. "Aren't you even going to ask me how my weekend was?" she asked, her voice laced with fake cheerfulness. That was it. I turned to her, finally looking her in the eye. "No, Linda. I don't give a damn how your weekend was. You've already made it clear where I stand in your life." Her smile faltered, but she quickly tried to recover. "Look, I know you're upset, but I've had time to think. I made a mistake, and I want to fix this. I want us to move past it." "Move past it?" I said, standing up. I could feel the anger rising in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Linda, you didn't just make a mistake. You planned this. You lied, you schemed, and you spent an entire weekend with another man after I begged you not to. And now you think we can just move past it like it never happened? She started to cry, but I wasn't buying it. I didn't think it would hurt you this much, she sobbed. I thought you'd understand. I thought our love was strong enough. Our love? I interrupted. Linda, love isn't screwing someone else and expecting your spouse to be okay with it. Love isn't lying and sneaking around. What you did wasn't love. It was selfishness. She tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. Don't, I said, my voice cold. Don't touch me. She froze, her hands still in the air. I'll do anything, she pleaded. I'll prove to you that I made a mistake and that I can be the wife you deserve. I let out a bitter laugh. The wife I deserve? Linda, the wife I deserved wouldn't have done this in the first place. I walked over to the kitchen table where I'd left a manila envelope. I picked it up and handed it to her. What's this? She asked, her hands trembling as she opened it. Divorce papers, I said flatly. I filed them on Friday. You'll notice the grounds are adultery, and if you look further, you'll see I'm suing Frank for alienation of affection. Her eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. You can't be serious, she whispered. Oh, I'm very serious, I said. I told you there would be consequences. You didn't believe me. Now you get to deal with them. She dropped the papers on the table and started crying harder. You don't have to do this, she sobbed. I love you. We can fix this. No, Linda, I said, my voice firm. You destroyed this, not me. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. I walked past her, heading for the guest room where I'd been sleeping. Before I closed the door, I turned back and said, You can sleep in the guest room tonight. I'll be staying in the master bedroom. And don't even think about touching me. You're not my wife anymore. You're just someone who used to mean everything to me. I shut the door and locked it, leaning against it as I listened to her cry on the other side. For the first time all weekend, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't over yet, not by a long shot, but this was the beginning of the end, and I was ready for it. The morning after our confrontation, I woke up feeling more exhausted than rested. My decision was made, but the weight of it lingered. I could hear Linda moving around in the kitchen, likely trying to act like everything was normal, but nothing was normal anymore, and it never would be again. I got dressed, went downstairs, and sat at the kitchen table while she prepared her breakfast. She tried to make small talk, but I cut her off. Linda, I'm not interested in pretending. Eat your breakfast, go to work, and let's keep this civil. That's the best you can hope for right now. She didn't argue. She nodded, her face pale and her eyes swollen from crying. Before she left, she turned to me and said, I still love you, you know. I looked up from my coffee and said, I loved you too. Once. The past tense hung in the air like a blade. She turned and left without another word. Once she was gone, I got to work. I started packing her belongings, methodically going through the house and separating her things from mine. It was therapeutic in a way. Reclaiming my space, my life. By mid-afternoon, I had everything of hers packed in black garbage bags and stacked neatly by the front door. I wasn't being cruel, I just needed the physical reminder of her presence gone. Then I made the call I'd been anticipating all weekend. Frank's wife answered, and I introduced myself. Do you know where your husband was this weekend? I asked. She hesitated. He said he was on a business trip. Why? I told her everything. I didn't spare any details, offering her the proof I'd gathered. She went silent for a moment, then said, I'd like to see it. An hour later, I was at her front door with the evidence. When she opened the door, I was stunned. She was gorgeous, composed, elegant, and far more than Frank deserved. I handed her the envelope with the photos and emails and explained everything. She thanked me, her voice calm but with an edge that told me Frank was in for a reckoning. Before I left, she said, I hope you find peace after all this. Back home, I sat on the couch staring at nothing. Linda's suitcase was still sitting by the door, and I knew she'd be back soon. When she returned, she froze at the sight of her belongings packed up. What's this? She asked, her voice trembling. It's your stuff, I said flatly. Take it and go. You have until the end of the day to find a place. She started crying again, pleading, but I didn't budge. You've made your choices, Linda. Now live with them. She packed her car and left, but not before looking at me one last time. I really did love you, she whispered. And I really did love you too, I replied, but not anymore. That night I sat in the quiet house reflecting on everything. The pain was still there, but so was a strange sense of relief. I wasn't tied to her betrayal anymore. I was free to start over. As I sat there, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Frank's wife. "Thank you for telling me. I filed for divorce today." I couldn't help but smile. The woman who had helped destroy my marriage was finally facing the consequences, and so was her accomplice. I deleted her text, turned off my phone, and poured myself a drink. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like mine to walk. As I sat there in the dark living room, the only light coming from the muted football game flickering on the screen and the amber glow of the whiskey in my glass, something finally cracked open inside my chest. Not the sharp, explosive break I'd felt the night she said I want to take a lover, but a slow, grinding fracture that had been building pressure for days. The silence in the house wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything we used to be. 10 years. 10 years of Sunday morning coffee on the porch, of her laughing at my terrible dad jokes, of falling asleep to the sound of her breathing next to me. 10 years of believing that when she said in sickness and in health, for better or worse, she actually meant it. And in one rehearsed, calm conversation, she erased all of it like it was nothing more than an inconvenience standing between her and some fleeting thrill. I hated her for that. God, I hated her. But what scared me more was how much I still loved the ghost of who I thought she was. The woman who used to dance with me in the kitchen while dinner burned. The woman who cried at stupid rom-coms and held my hand during turbulence. The woman who promised me forever and then decided forever, came with an escape clause she never told me about. I took another sip of whiskey and let it burn all the way down. Good. I wanted something to hurt that I could control. People keep asking me if I feel vindicated. If the pepper-sprayed lingerie, the hidden cameras, the pizza deliveries, the divorce papers served fresh off the printer, if all of it made me feel better. The truth? It didn't make me feel better. It made me feel alive. There's a difference. For weeks I'd been walking around half dead, smiling like a robot, sleeping in the guest room, pretending I wasn't bleeding out on the inside. The moment she said those words, "I want to take a lover," she reached into my chest and switched me off. The revenge didn't heal me, it just reminded me I still had a pulse. Every recording I planted, every account I closed, every camera I hid, it was me screaming, "I'm still here. You don't get to kill me quietly." Was it cruel? Yes. Was it beneath me? Probably. Do I regret a single second of it? Not one. Because the alternative was worse. The alternative was smiling and saying, "Sure, honey, go have your weekend. I'll keep the home fires burning." The alternative was becoming the guy who swallows his own spine and calls it love. I refused to be that man. I'd rather be the villain in her story than the doormat in mine. I keep replaying the moment she walked back into the house on Sunday night. Skin still angry and red from the lingerie, eyes puffy, trying to force that fake bright "I'm home," like nothing had happened. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't the one pretending, she was. And when I handed her the divorce papers, I saw it, just for a second, the mask slipped. She realized the game wasn't hers anymore. That was the closest thing to justice I'll ever get. Some nights I wake up at 3 a.m. and the bed still feels too big. I reach out of habit and find cold sheets where she used to be. Those are the moments the anger deserts me and nothing's left but raw, aching grief. I cry sometimes, ugly, silent tears into the pillow so the neighbors don't hear. Not for the marriage, that's dead and buried, but for the version of my life I thought I was going to have. The future we planned that will never exist now. The kids we never got around to having. The growing old together fantasy that turned out to be one-sided. I'm angry at myself too. Angry that I didn't see it coming. Angry that I spent 10 years building a life with someone capable of looking me in the eye and saying she needed experiences outside of us. Angry that I still flinch when my phone buzzes because part of me expects it to be her, saying she's sorry, saying she made the biggest mistake of her life. She hasn't texted, she never will. And that hurts in a way I can't explain. But here's the part no one wants to hear. I'm also relieved. The constant low-grade anxiety of wondering if today would be the day she dropped the bomb. Gone. The eggshell walking, the second-guessing every late night from work, the quiet fear that I wasn't enough gone for 10 years. I shaped myself around her happiness like wet clay. Now I get to decide what shape I want to be when I dry. I've started running again. Actually running. Not the half-hearted jogging I used to do to stay in shape for her. I run until my lungs burn and my legs scream because physical pain is honest. It doesn't pretend to be anything it's not. I've reconnected with friends I let drift because couple dinners were more important. I cook whatever the hell I want for dinner, even if it's just steak for 3 nights in a row. I blast music that she hated. I leave dishes in the sink without a guilt trip. I'm remembering who I was before I became Linda's husband. And yeah, I've gone on a couple of dates. Nothing serious. Just reminding myself that women can look at me without pity or disgust. The first time a woman laughed at one of my stupid jokes and meant it, I almost cried in the middle of the restaurant. Not because she was special, she wasn't, but because it felt like proof that I'm not broken. Just bent for a while. I don't know who I'll be a year from now. Maybe harder, maybe softer. Probably both. But I do know this. I will never again hand someone the knife and bare my throat while calling it trust. Love isn't blindness. Love isn't self-erasure. Love isn't saying, do whatever you want as long as you come home to me. I confused surrender with strength for a decade, and it almost cost me my soul. So yes, I burned it all down. I salted the earth. I made sure her little fantasy weekend curdled into a nightmare she'll never forget. I weaponized every tool at my disposal, and I sleep just fine at night. Because the house is quiet now, because the bed is mine, because the future, whatever it looks like, belongs to me again. And for the first time in 10 years, when I look in the mirror, I recognize the man staring back. That's worth every tear, every sleepless night, every petty act of revenge. That's worth becoming the villain. Because the hero of my story was dying, and I chose to save him instead.